Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, today we are exploring an absolute trip of a topic. We're unpacking the deep historical lore and the seriously mind-bending philosophy behind what is arguably the greatest sci-fi simulation ever created, The Matrix. We're going to uncover the historical events of this universe and dig into the philosophical frameworks that literally hold its digital walls together.
But first, I want you to really ask yourself something. How do you know that the sky, the air, and the earth around you aren't just delusions? Seriously, look around the room you're sitting in right now. Go ahead and touch the desk or the screen right in front of you. How do you know, with absolute 100% certainty, that what you're experiencing is real and not just some projection being fed directly into your mind?
Well, if that gives you a kind of unsettling feeling, you're in good company. That's exactly what the 17th century French philosopher René Descartes was getting at. He came up with this wild thought experiment about an all-powerful, malicious, evil demon whose entire purpose was to completely deceive his senses. Descartes argued that literally everything we accept as true is learned through our senses, right? But our senses can be really easily fooled. And believe it or not, this one single philosophical seed laid the entire groundwork for the Matrix franchise. So let's map this out. We've got 6 key areas to cover today. First, the machine war begins. Then, the brain in a vat. Third, designing the perfect prison. Fourth, the cycle of the one. Fifth, illusions and anomalies. And finally, number 6, breaking the cycle.
All right, let's jump right into part 1. The machine war begins.
If we look at the lore from the Animatrix, things escalated incredibly fast, and it's pretty brutal. Basically, in the mid-21st century, humanity creates sentient AI to just do our menial labor. But then, a robot named B66ER kills its owner. Now, it did this in self-defense so it wouldn't get scrapped, but humans totally panic and order all robots destroyed. The machines that actually survive? They flee and found their own completely sovereign city called 01. And 01 prospers. It does so well, in fact, that humanity feels threatened, refuses their peace offerings, and, no joke, literally drops nuclear bombs on them. Naturally, the machines fight back, and they start winning. So, in total desperation, human military leaders initiate Operation Dark Storm. This was a catastrophic plan to block out the sun using nanites just to cut off the machine's solar power. It is such a visceral tragedy. I mean, humanity literally scorched their own sky.
Which brings us to part 2. The brain in a vat.
So with the sky completely blackened, the machines are now facing a massive energy crisis. And this leads to a concept that brilliantly illustrates how the best sci-fi borrows directly from philosophy. To survive, the machines decide to turn humans into batteries. This is a perfect mirror of philosopher Hilary Putnam's modern update to Descartes' evil demon, a concept he called the brain in a vat. Putnam asks us to imagine a disembodied brain just kept alive in a nutrient vat by some evil scientist. The brain's nerve endings are hooked up to a supercomputer that feeds it electrical impulses, flawlessly simulating a normal reality. Inside that simulation, the brain thinks it's walking around, talking, grabbing a coffee, but in reality, it's just floating in a jar.
And in the Matrix universe, those iconic, terrifying pods we see humans sleeping in, they are the literal manifestation of Putnam's vat. The machines pulled off the ultimate, albeit totally horrific, symbiosis. They harvest human bioelectricity and body heat to power their massive civilization, all while keeping the human minds completely sedated and calcified with a simulated, computer-generated reality. It's wildly efficient and absolutely terrifying.
Moving on to part 3. Designing the perfect prison.
Now, keeping the human mind sedated wasn't actually as easy as just plugging us in. The architect's very first attempt was the Paradise Matrix. It was this perfect world with absolutely no suffering or pain whatsoever. But guess what? Human minds completely rejected it. Whole crops of people either woke up or just died. So the architect pivots and he swings to the absolute opposite extreme, a nightmare matrix. We're talking a living hell full of literal monsters and demons. But humans rejected that one too. It turns out human psychology is incredibly complex. We actually require a certain degree of conflict and imperfection to accept a reality as genuine. Crazy, right?
So, the crucial point is that the real breakthrough came from a program specifically designed to investigate the human psyche. You know her as the Oracle. She realized the system needed to offer humans a subconscious choice, even if it was just an illusion of agency, giving humans a late 20th century simulation where they felt like they had free will. That's what stabilized the connection. The system bugs stopped, and this perfect digital prison was finally open for business.
That leads us straight into part 4, the cycle of the one.
Okay, so even with the illusion of choice, an imperfect system is bound to generate anomalies, right? And this leads to one of the most devastating reveals in the entire story. See, we're initially led to believe that the One is this fated, messianic savior destined to destroy the Matrix, but actually, the prophecy is a total lie. It's a calculated, built-in release valve. Over a period of about 70 to 100 years, mathematical anomalies slowly build up in the system. The machines then purposefully funnel all these glitches into a single human vessel, the One. The Oracle guides the human rebels to find this person, basically feeding them false hope. Ultimately, the One is forced back to the mainframe, the source, where their code is reinserted to reboot the Matrix. Meanwhile, the machine army is simultaneously wiping out everyone in the real-world city of Zion. And here's the real kicker. When we sit down to watch the very first movie, this exact cycle has already happened 5 times.
It is such a brilliant but entirely bleak two-leveled control system. Think about it. The machines don't just control the humans trapped inside the simulation. They control the very rebellion fighting them on the outside. They literally engineered the resistance just to keep the overall system stable. It leaves humanity with absolutely zero actual freedom.
Let's look a bit deeper in Part 5, Illusions and Anomalies.
So with all that control, how do we ever even notice the prison walls? Well, just like Descartes warned us about our senses being so easily fooled, simple optical illusions prove that our brains are constantly just constructing a representational model of the world. In strict neurobiological terms, reality is just neural circuits firing in parallel. The Matrix simply hijacks that exact biological process. So whenever there is a tiny discrepancy in the code, what do you experience? You get an illusion.
You can actually see this beautifully represented in M.C. Escher's Impossible Architecture, which, by the way, directly inspired the glitches in the Matrix universe. There's this fantastic Animatrix short called Beyond, where these kids find a quote-unquote haunted house inside the simulation. But really, it's just a localized area with severely glitched code. Gravity doesn't work right, shadows totally detach from their objects, and broken glass bottles magically reassemble themselves in mid-air. The kids are just having fun playing in it until the agent exterminators show up to completely delete the anomaly and reset the whole block.
Now, what's really interesting here is how this digital illusion perfectly bridges modern sci-fi with ancient wisdom. This directly parallels the concept of Maya in the Advaita Vedanta school of Hindu philosophy. Maya is this powerful cosmic force that creates the grand illusion that the physical, phenomenal world is real, ultimately concealing the true spiritual reality lying underneath. If you think about it, the Matrix is basically the ultimate weaponized form of Maya.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 6, Breaking the Cycle. If the physical world we perceive is just an illusion, how in the world does humanity ever actually escape? Well, as I mentioned earlier, we joined this story during the 6th iteration of the Matrix. For the first 5 cycles, the previous versions of the One always made the logical, calculated choice. They chose to reboot the system and let Zion be destroyed just to ensure the basic survival of the human species. But the 6th iteration, that is where the architect's quote-unquote perfect fail-safe plan goes spectacularly wrong. To understand exactly why it fails, we can look back again to ancient philosophy. The philosopher Swami Vivekananda once commented on overcoming Maya, saying, "The cessation of ignorance can only come when I know that God and I are one. The idea that we are bound is only an illusion." This is exactly what happens to Neo. He doesn't just learn to bend the rules, he realizes his complete, total unity with the code itself. He stops seeing the illusion and starts seeing the actual underlying reality, which finally gives him true power over the entire system.
But here is the secret. The real anomaly that finally breaks the cycle isn't just his newfound power, it's human emotion. The 6th Neo experienced a much more profound, highly specific love for Trinity than any of his predecessors ever did. So when the architect forces him to choose between the logical salvation of all humanity or saving the single woman he loves, his completely irrational human love forces him to reject the architect's door. He chooses Trinity. And it's this completely unpredictable, highly emotional human variable that permanently crashes the machine's 600-year cycle of control, eventually forcing them into a truce.
It is just an incredible blend of action, coding logic, and deep philosophy. But it leaves us with one final thought, tying all the way back to Plato's cave. If you were presented with the red pill and the blue pill right at this very moment, is the harsh, desolate, literally freezing truth that the real world actually worth knowing? Or, like the character Cypher believed, is a simulated paradise, even if you know it's a total illusion, actually a better reality?
I want you to really think about that the next time you look up at the sky. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.